technology wonderful?
Yes. Got your clicker. Or is that your cell phone?
That's my clicker. That's my presentator. See if they can actually get it to transfer over to the other. We'll see if it'll work. The joys of having a ThinkPad. See, nobody uses IBMs, right?
Don't go there.
Don't go there. It's got 2 3-minute clips. 130 seconds.
Alright, well, I'm going to run out and cover 2:05 since you got this one.
Well, they're doing that and see if they can get it over. Let's talk a little bit. Let me introduce myself. I'm Gordon Russell. I'm at the Charleston School of Law, for some of you. And there we get up. You know what everything that I wanted to talk about to start with this idea of clearly what we do in the classroom today is different than what we did 10, 15 years ago, right? How many of your faculty or yourselves are using PowerPoint? How many are putting video clips in? Audio clips. Yeah, we're all doing all these different things within the classroom sort of structure, the sort of process, and they're sort of the norm. Why do you do those? Make it interesting.
Because we can.
Because we can?
Different learning style.
We think that kids use that, we think they're different than us, right? Theoretically, we think those pieces are a little bit different. We're trying to entertain them. Maybe.
Some people say it better.
Huh?
Some people just say it better than I could.
Say it better than I could. That's probably true. All the time I think that way. Well, clearly, I think if we look at, how many of you go to best practice? I mean, are you familiar? There's a little new blog out there called Best Practices in Legal Education. And you're looking at that. It's that group. That's the. I think it's founded by the group that basically Roy Stuckey and those guys who wrote the book on best practices in legal education, and it's all those movers and shakers aspects. And when you couple that, I think, with a couple other things that are going on there. For example, one of the things we know for sure is, or at least we theorize in legal education, is the people who are coming into the classroom are different, right? Different learners, different ways they learn. Any of you read, there's a new book out on, I think it's called like Juris One, which did a study of, it really is a group from Florida State that did with their entering classes, had them do Myers-Briggs tests. Any Myers-Briggs followers here? A few of you? Basically what Florida State is doing is, did for a number of years, is every student who entered the classroom, their first year students took a Myers-Briggs test. The book is interesting because what it did is, it looked at the students, law students, so they extrapolated the information they had over 4 or 5 years, and looked at the breakdown of their students. And then they compared it with what your percentages are in the normal population for types of learners. Okay? And then what they've done...
Definite maybe.
Huh?
It's a definite maybe.
Definitely maybe?
Definitely. It's better than a definite no.
That's a good sign. Got a little sound. We're running a little late, so we'll quickly go through them. So I've got no picture. We were going to test clickers, but since they don't have turning point connected to their laptop, their machines here, we're out of luck. So, but let's talk about why we're changing what we're doing. As I mentioned, so what Florida State did was the authors of this book looked at it, and then the last 10 chapters or so, which are kind of entertaining in a sense, so what they did was they do a comparison, so you have a chapter about what type of learner you are, individually learning types that you are, and then they look at what percentage in the sort of general population of Myers-Briggs takers, and then they look at the percentage of the law school, so you can see where you sort of stand, and then they do a chapter on what that means for you as a student. Okay? How you should learn, how you should study, what things you should be thinking about as you are taking part in law school. And I thought that was kind of interesting. You know, we want the students to master material and integrate skills. You know? Back in the good old days, how did we do that? We had a chalkboard, we wrote on it, students took their notes. In the classroom today, probably most of your students using a laptop. I kind of like this. I don't have a screen of laptops in front of me. It's kind of unique. Probably not what you find in your own classroom. It does raise an interesting question, though. Go back to that. A lot of debate. How many of you think we should allow laptops in the classroom? Oh, how many of you think we shouldn't?
Laptops connected to the internet is the assumption?
Must be a technology conference, right? And I'm undecided. There's a part of me that says, let's shut it down. The problem, I think, for those people, as I read all this literature on it, what is the main concern that people seem to have with people using a laptop?
Playing solitaire.
Playing solitaire? Well, I can get rid of that, right? That's not so hard. This class is a great classroom. I can walk up and down it. I can look around. I can see what you got on. So I can control that a bit, right? If we were using Turning Point in here, which we use at our school. We're a Turning Point school. Every one of our students is giving a clicker when they come into school. So theoretically, I can control that. The way I'd like to control it, if I could get my faculty on board, it's very simple. I'd like to make about 10 to 20% of our grade based on quiz questions asked in the classroom on a daily or weekly basis. So at any point in the classroom, there could be a question. We'd come up. My faculty who have used them, what they say they get, better results. Anybody using clickers in here? Do you think you're getting better results?
But it wasn't starting.
I'm sorry. Yeah, at least you have some feel on it. And simply put, I mean, historically, what have we done in the classroom? Lecture. I teach a subject. What am I looking for when I look at across you, when I'm telling you something? Looking for those nodding heads, that eyes. I'm looking to see the glazed over eyes, right? When I see those, I'm beginning to wonder whether you get it. So I'm mind reading, right? I'm mind reading this class. Or I get one of you to stand up and to answer the question for me. And eureka, they get it right. What do I assume? Everybody's got it. Not necessarily the case, right? Most of you could have missed it. You're never going to shake your head no when everybody else is shaking their head yes anyway, right? So what does the clicker give me? Clicker gives me 3 variants from a classroom standpoint. Okay? I get instant feedback. I teach a concept, I see the results up there. You know, I use the 80-20 rule. Okay? What's my 80-20 rule? 80% we get it right, we're moving on. We're checking forward, right? The 20% we left them behind. But if we left them behind, what have we given them that they didn't have in the past?
The right answer.
We've given them the right answer, but well, that may be all they want, right? No, but they now have. I've gone to law school twice. Isn't that ironic? I've done an undergraduate, a JD law degree twice. University of Western Ontario, Canada, University of New Mexico. And the only thing I can tell you out of 2 times going to law school is I still don't think like a lawyer. So somewhere along the line I lost it, right? Okay, it didn't make an impression. But didn't you all have a class you took at law school and you thought you were getting it? Really felt comfortable. You knew that class. You knew the subject matter. You went in and took an exam. We're probably all the old people here for most of us, right? When you used to have to go into law school and check the board, see what your marks were. Remember that day? At the end of that first semester, you check that board, you know, first year, first school. And you look at that mark and you go, it can't be mine, right? It just couldn't be mine, because I knew that subject cold. Yeah? Well, the advantage of the clicker and the technology at least gives you a chance to say, I'm not getting it. Now, you still have some options. If I just saw 80% of my classmates got it right, what's my first option?
Ask someone.
I'd probably study in a study group, right? Now, I'm not going to be obvious about it and go, how did you guys all get it right and I got it wrong? I'm probably going to say, now, what was the answer on that question? You know? Maybe we need to talk. And if I don't want to do that, at least now I have a reason to go see the professor, right? As much as I don't want to see them, I now have a reason to go in and see the professor. Okay? Dang it, I don't understand what's going on. Or at least if they don't come in, when you come in for your final mark and they say they understood it all semester and you pull up, the nice thing about Turning Point technology is when I pull up all that stuff, guess what? It's all anonymous when the students do, but I got a great report. So I got a report and I can show the students and say, you didn't get it all semester and you never came and saw me. Or maybe if I'm proactive, what can I do? I can say, student B, you better come in and see me. Or maybe I have a teaching assistant and I say, can you go talk to our teaching assistant about this because you're going to be having some problems. But in an ideal first year world, what could I really do? If I've got all my first year professors doing this in the first 6 weeks of class and doing it on a weekly basis, what could I hopefully do with my first year professors? We might actually sit down as a group. And I'd say, you know, in my class, these 5 students seem to be struggling. And you say, funny thing, same 5 students are struggling in my class. And you'd over there say, you know what? And I wouldn't have expected it was those 5 students, maybe, looking at a lot of stuff. But what should I hope to be able to do from that? What would I do?
Give them a refund?
Yeah, they go home. Well, theoretically, number one, if you're really thinking about it and they shouldn't be there, we can get them out early. So maybe you say, in the first 8 weeks of course, you got a problem, we talk to you, and we give them a refund and say, go, if you don't want to stay here. Now, I'll give a little honest take there. I work at a school that's a for-profit model. What do you think they're going to say about that?
We have a remedial program for you.
Well, and that's the point. Can I get them to a point where they want to be in an academic support program? You know, to a piece of a program that might help them.
But who wants to hire
Any legal writing people here?
remedial classes?
What?
But who wants to hire the lawyer who went through remedial classes?
Well, but it's the skill set of what you're missing. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Legal writing?
Yeah.
What's the role of legal writers?
Canary in the coal mine?
Huh?
We get to play canary in the coal mine. That's mistakes first.
You do. But most legal writing programs are going to tell you, at least this is my theory, they're going to say, if they can write, we can make them legal writers. If they can't write, can you do it?
Not really.
Why?
Because writing is thinking.
Writing is thinking. Also, we probably have too many in your class.
15. I have a
15?
decent class.
Not bad. But it is a structural aspect of saying, the problem is, we never think about these things in a holistic. I'm at a 4th tier law school, new startup. Okay? We had a pretty good profile first. We were probably one of the best profiles of a new law school that wasn't a state school for the first class that we entered. First of all, we had 200 students. Pretty impressive, right? Out of 900 applicants, and unaccredited going for ABA school. Our median was about a 153, 154. That still meant that our lower half had a problem, right? When I tell you an LSAT score, what does 148 mean to you if I say they have a 148 LSAT? You have somebody in your class, or a group in your class that have 148. What does that mean? Anybody know? 148 is the 50th percentile of the LSAT scores. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that that's the rate at which 50% of the people taking an LSAT were above that, 50% were below it. How many people took the LSAT last year?
He did.
No, I already got one of those. It's an actual number. It's actually nice to have you here. How do you do?
Well, doing fine.
Good. Here's the challenge. Does anybody know what the high water mark was of LSAT takers in this country? I believe it's been almost 15 years ago. 1993, 1994. We're almost 100,000 LSAT takers at that point. That was the high water mark in the taking of LSATs in this country. And then it went down. Went down to as low as 66,000. Yeah, 66,000. And in the period that it dropped in that, you know how many people got into law school?
60.
When there were 100,000, you know how many people got into law school? 44,000, give or take. When there were 66,000, how many do you think got into law school? 44,000. So if you say there's a noticeable difference, there is, because you're taking people who are at risk. And we as professors, how many professors in here? What do we as professors think our job is? We want all the law students to be like when we were at law school, right? Bright, energetic, smart, intelligent, taught all the law, understood it, just a joy to teach, right? Yeah? I understand that. I always tell this story. I went to a small high school in London, Ontario. We were the smallest school in the city. There were total 900 students. We were a 5-year program. That meant in Ontario we actually had a grade 13, the equivalent of your first year of college. I actually transferred to an American college and they gave me credit for my whole first year for my grade 13. Right? So that made us a class of about 150 to 160 students, right? We were bright, intelligent. We were streamed. We had 2 high schools that we could go to. My high school had 900. Other high school had almost 2,500. Who do you think the 900 were? They were assistant of stream. Anybody know what streaming is? Any education majors here? High-low classes. Everybody that's successful, you stream them into a high class. Everybody unsuccessful, you stream them into a low class through elementary school. Then you stream those in the low into a high school where they're not going to go on to college. We were a low middle class high school, blue collar. Okay? Almost all of my parents and all my friends had not been to college. Blue collar workers. But boy, they had achieving kids who all got streamed into classes and went all the way through high school. You know what most of my friends ended up doing out of that experience? They all became teachers. You know why? They thought that's what teaching was all about. Right? Fun, entertaining, great classes, students engaged. I talk to them now, as they're starting to get ready to retire. Most of them take an early retirement. and they say, boy, were we wrong. That wasn't what high schools were like once they got rid of the streaming piece. So, we have a problem. Because the classes, whether we like it or not, if we're going to take 44,000 students, and we may be up to 70,000, 75,000 takers now, you're still going to be taking lower. If you're at a top tier school, it's not your problem, probably. You're at a 4th tier school, and you're about a quarter of your class. You have students who need remedial. But we've never dealt with remedial in a remedial sense. We've never dealt with the issues of how do you solve the problem that our students have. You know? Anyway, I'm going to skip through a little bit of this. I was going to talk about, you know, all these neat things we use in the classroom, you know, like pictures and which is the real picture. You know, video clips. Students love them. Familiar mediums. We could do some nice facts. I got a nice little, I don't know, sound's not going to come through. I'm afraid of that. Great clip from Fractured. All you've seen Fractured? Go through that. You know, got a great line, you know, for those of you who study evidence. If you've seen Fractured, Anthony Hopkins makes this great scene with the lawyer where he does some nice things with them. I'll put this up on the web so you can actually see them. But we believe that technology in the classroom helps teach these issues. helps us to be effective teachers in the classroom. It does all those things. We've already talked about should students have laptops. In times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learners find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. Gary Coffin. Okay? If we don't change, will we become irrelevant? I mean, we're in a great changing period of law school education. Does it worry you that there's this whole model of for-profits out there now teaching legal education? Anybody know how many students are at Concord? I'm really shocked to hear that they have about 700-800 students a year entering their online programs. Would it shock you even more to know that it costs them about, I was just talking to them, it's now $9,200 a year to go to Concord online? 4-year program, so 9, 18, 27. For $36,000 they can graduate. How many of you, your institutions, are less than $36,000 for 1 year? Write them down, I should be going there. Does anybody know what the average debt load of our students are today?
67.
Yeah, I think the last one I saw was around $67,000 a year, and I actually think that was from a year ago, and I think the new report that came up from the ABA actually bumped that up closer to about $80,000 now. $80,000 in debt. Consumer protection. You know, protects synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, instant messaging, video conferencing, what, all interesting sort of pieces that intrigue me because at some point we have to think about pedagogy, much as we hate to think about it. Anybody who's familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, can they tell me what all this means? No? Everybody glazes over and says it doesn't apply.
I thought that was a food pyramid.
Thought it was a food pyramid. It is, you know, in a sense. It's a food of how we sort of levels of learning aspect. Most studies say we at law school really do a great job back here at these levels. You know, black letter law, rote learning, do a nice job of that. We do. What would lawyers say and law, the bar say we don't do a very good job of? Synthesis and application. Students can't come out being able to think like those parts that they want, sort of structurally sort of pieces. So you have this sort of pedagogical sort of issues that are part of that. But what I'm interested in, aside all this, is do the ABA standards provide a way to use technology to replace face-to-face instruction? Yes or no?
Yes.
Think they do? I think they do. I think they very much do. Interpretation 3063. Courses in which 2/3 or more of the course instruction consists of regular classroom instruction shall not be treated as distance education. Think about that for a minute. What does the ABA say about distance education? Anybody done any distance education? Teaching online, teaching in class? Anybody done it? I've had the great experience of doing it for the last almost 8 years in an LLM program, in addition to doing some courses on my own with it. So I'm very familiar with that sort of part. But this intrigues me because it's saying is, I can take 1/3 of my class. You can take 1/3 of your class, and it doesn't make a difference. How many weeks are your classes? 15? 14 to 15? Let's say 15 to round it out. 5 weeks of your class doesn't have to be face-to-face. And it doesn't impinge upon the distance learning piece. And that's important because what does the ABA standards say about distance education?
4 per semester.
Anybody know?
It was like 4 a semester, or a certain number. There's a certain number of minutes they can count for.
ABA says for a distance class, if I teach a distance class, I do not teach a distance class in my first year. Okay? For some strange reason, the ABA believes that there is a value in having face-to-face classroom time in your first year. Anybody know why the ABA thinks there's value? Do you see any value? The ABA was...
I was just going to say, you get a little bit more immediate feedback. You get, a sense of whether the students are getting it.
You hope from that face-to-face that you might not get. Okay, theoretically, I agree. Here's my thought. Theoretically, here's my whole thought why it doesn't, to me, work. I believe legal education was built on this myth of the Socratic methodology, right? So we have the bastardized Socratic methodology of law school, which is, how big is this class? How many, you're all experts in teaching. How many would you say this classroom holds?
90.
60 to 80, right? That's sort of standard first-year size class, right? That we can teach a first-year class to 60 or 70 students using a Socratic methodology, which is this belief, which I call Socratic television. Think about it. It says that I can start a dialogue with Anthony here, and as he's answering the questions, and you're doing your dialogue with him, what are you assuming the other 60 students in the class are doing? They're learning it. They're going. He's expressing the same things that the other 60 students are going to express. Do we really believe that? Do we really believe that watching that is going to give us that effect? No. But the ABA says there's a value in the classroom experience. But so what? We have 60, 90, 100 there, and we teach by Socratic. What is the difference between that and me having a bank of 90 TVs and I focus in on one of them and say, go to it, and the others watch it? I don't think there's much difference. I may be wrong, but I don't think there's that much. Other than the fact that when they're not paying attention, I can see it, right? I can slap the person who falls asleep. I can watch the person who's doing solitaire. I can try to keep attention. See, he's doing some fun stuff over here. He's lost me. I've bored him to death, so he's off doing whatever, type of thing. So we can control it. But the ABA says there is some value. It's interesting because I do agree with them in the sense their value is placed on the fact that I, as a teacher, am available to them. I have office hours. You all have office hours? How many people visit you in your office hours?
I had 2.
You have 2. Same 2 probably on a weekly basis, right? Whether they need to be there or not, or probably they don't need to be there. They're probably the brightest kids in your class, right? Okay. So number 1. So there's some contact piece. Do I believe there can be contact? Yes. I think that that's important. But where's the contact that we make it? It's not going to necessarily just be the office hour. It's the fact that they can see you walking around. And like in the old days, it used to be exciting. I could say as a librarian, gee, my faculty come in and use my library. When was the last time you saw a faculty member in your library? Other than walking through, Yeah, and we think that, and we also have it back, and we know that they're doing a lot of things. We put together services for them, pieces, same type of thing. So that's not the second piece, and I understand this piece is they say the first year is an opportunity for them to learn in small groups. Well, I understand that, and I think that's great. The problem I have with small groups is, how do they get developed? Have you ever thought about which students are studying together? Anybody have any ideas who's studying in small groups in your classes?
You put them together. You've got 120 students, and you say, you go here, you go here, you go here, and you mix them up the next time. And
That's a great idea. Do you think that a lot of faculty are doing that? I agree with you. I think that there's a proactive piece. Any of you read Excel, which is Michael Schwartz's book? Any of you been at a school where Michael Schwartz has come to speak to you? Michael Schwartz believes, and in his Excel book, is this idea that you create study groups, that you teach students. He actually has his design is you have teaching fellows from your second or third year. They meet as study with the study groups that you assign, and you keep them on track and tasked so that they learn how to use a study group. That it's just not an experience. So you take that. So I agree. I think the AD is right. There is a small group of availability that law school can bring to a first-year process, but it's not something that we necessarily structure or put together. Okay? But even given all that, I can take a third of my class. I can take 5 weeks and do something else exciting. Is anybody doing anything other than face-to-face in their classes, in a regular classroom? So let's think. For purposes of standard 306D and E, even though they also include substantial online interaction or other common components of distance education courses, so long as such instruction complies with the provisions of subsection 1 and 2 of standard 306C. Must have been written by lawyers, right? So what they're saying is, basically we have a distance education requirements, which are laid out in 306C, and as long as you're doing something that is part of that, you're okay. So 306D says, a law school shall not grant a student more than 4 credit hours in any term, nor more than a total of 12 credit hours towards the JD degree for courses qualifying under this standard. That's the distance education standard. So distance education, I can only teach 12 credit hours, I can only do 4 a term, and they can only be after first year. So in essence, if I want to do a distance education class every semester, what would I have to do? Second and third year, 3 credits each semester, and they could have their 4. Because they can't take a 5th, they can only take 4. Structural piece that they could do. But, and there's the other side. Until they create 28 credit hours before they can take any of those. Now, remember we went back to the other that said I can do up to a third of my classroom, but it has to apply to 306C1 and C2. So C1, ample interaction with the instructor and other students, both inside and outside the formal structure of the course throughout its duration. Somebody here said they taught a distance education class? How do you provide ample interaction in your course?
When I did a distance?
Yeah.
I think it was better than when I did it
But if you were answering ABA said to you, you have to show ample interaction. How did you?
I had discussion questions that they had to answer every week. I posted 4 questions based on material that they were asked to work on a weekly basis, and then they had to post and have to respond to another student's posting as well, and then I'd come in as well and
So you could hear that. What she did, I assume you were using a course software?
Yeah, I was just using
WebCT. So what she did was she did a WebCT course, put up some questions, required the students to actually have to answer them. Think about that. We actually want our students to learn what as lawyers? Probably we want them to learn how to write, right? And we teach them a legal research class, and that may be the only, and we now have the ABA says we have to have an upper level division writing, right? But theoretically, for something that they're going to do the rest of their life, which is right, we don't give them a lot of chance. All of a sudden you have an opportunity in a thread of discussion aspect to make them right, for them to actually have to put their thoughts together. Any of you ever been surprised by a student in your class, seemed to be getting it, doing all those things, and then they wrote their exam, and you realized they couldn't string together a sentence, put the information together? Yeah, it is a skill set we have to have. So ample interaction is kind of a very easy term if you think about it. Because there's not really a standard in distance education. They're really saying to you, show us to us. So the hurdle, I think, is very low on distance education of showing ample interaction. So when they say I have to meet this in my face-to-face class, shouldn't be a difficult sort of process. Now, think about it, because I'm going to come back to this. Ample interaction. Because, let's go to 2. There is ample monitoring of student effort and accomplishments as the course progresses. How did you do that?
I gave them 3 assignments over the period of the 15 weeks, and each time they submitted one, they got a grade. It counted 15% of their grade, and the final counted for a larger percentage.
So you're able to monitor and the accomplishments still a fairly low threshold. Think about it. In distance education, they ask us to do things. How do we do that in typical first-year face-to-face classes? It's go back to the first one. How is there ample interaction? What do we assume the interaction is taking place? The reality is we're assuming the interaction is taking place in the classroom, right? So the only place that interaction can be taking place is when I and the student are interacting together. How often in a class of 80 do you actually get to interact with one of those students? Scary, isn't it? But that's considered ample interaction in the process. So, you know, and how do you monitor student effort and accomplishment as the course progresses in a typical face-to-face classroom? How many of you get final 100% exams? How many of you give course participation? Okay, so that would assume that you're doing some type of this if you're giving. But clearly, for most law school exams that are, 80%, 90% at the end, we're saying that monitoring student effort is done by giving an exam at the end of the class. It meets that component piece. So in a sense, if I look at these two standards, and I want to integrate these into a non-traditional, non-face-to-face component of my classroom, what am I probably going to have to do? The reality is, I'm probably going to have to do more than I have to do in a face-to-face classroom. Okay? So I'm going to take 5 weeks and take them into a non-face-to-face. I'm probably going to be able to have to mark something or look at something, right? So I can see if they're getting it. Once I got back with them, we spent weeks and weeks going through how to use Blackboard. Made them an expert on Blackboard. Every Friday afternoon for 8 weeks. The end of the philosophical discussion was all done and said. We sat down and had a great 2-hour conversation, and his answer to me was, "This is wonderful, Gord. Great stuff. I can see all the purpose of it. Why would I want to do it? It's more work for me." Yeah? He's probably right. Because you need to make those requirements, those pieces. But how do we provide interaction if we want to do this? I think there are a lot of ways to be creative and with the instructor to do some things that are very simple, very easy, and very inexpensive. Okay? First thing I can do. How many of you use or have used anyway instant messaging? Any of you use instant messaging for your office hours? Allow students to be able to actually just IM you during that period of time. A little more formal than they, a lot of you are using email. But a structural IM sort of piece allows you to do some of those things. What we've done at our school is we are just in the process of moving over to Google Apps. Okay? So our email system will be Google. We outsource as much as possible what we consider non-essential, what I consider non-essential. Okay? I'm not in the process of web hosting. If I can find a web hosting solution to anything, I'm going to use it because it's not what we're about. So we've set up Gmail. Reason is we now have a universe of our students. There's a set universe that all have IM capabilities. So they can IM. We created a reference IM, so a reference desk librarian is always on the IM. We rotate it through the library and who's going to be responsible during that period of time. They can IM through. We hope that we can build a community. The problem with this is the downside is if my students open up Google Mail, all of you that got your laptops there, what can they be doing with each other? Scary, isn't it? Scary thought that he could be IMing you as you answer your question. It really changes the dynamics of the classroom a bit, doesn't it? We can move, for a number of years, I used a software called Peloton. The reason I use Peloton is it's just a shareware out there. Anybody use Peloton, familiar with it? www.peloton.com. One of the biggest share, it's a voice over IP with group rooms. And there are all types of groups. The only problem with it is there are 2 types. You can either eliminate the adult ones, really shrinks down the number of groups there are. But you name it, there are people out there in every type of group you can think about who have created groups out there. But the nice thing for my player is I could create my own group. So I could create a group for my class structurally, and then what I did for my classes on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights, I would allow the students to choose which night they would come in, but in essence, they would come in and join me. So we would have an online, just as she was talking about things they had to do during the week, and then on Wednesday night or Sunday night, they joined me. So I'd give them assignment, pieces that they had to do, things they had to discuss. Then they had a chance to ask questions. And the great thing about Peloton is it's voice over IP, so as long as they have a microphone, they can talk, so you can hear them. So it's not just chatting. I hate chatting. I can't type good enough. So I can hear them. They could hear me. We can talk. And it's got a little thing called raise your hand. So I'd tell them they had to raise their hand to ask me a question. So they'd raise their hand, they'd ask me questions, so I controlled it, and then I gave an answer back, and we could go through. So it was like a dialogue discussion of what they had gone through. And we kept it down. Usually the classes I was teaching were somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 students. So splitting it in half, never had more than about 15, but it worked very well. Today there are a lot of other products out there that would do the same thing. One of the ones we've been using for the last, again, in the online LLM that I teach in, is Mega Meeting. Okay? You can use WebEx. There's some free ones out there. But basically they allow you to create an online meeting piece space. You can push out your PowerPoint. They can push back to you. You can take over their desktop so they can show you what they're doing. They can walk through stuff. Works really good for an advanced legal research course where you want to see what they're doing, and if they're having problems, you can push it out to them. So structurally, it works in those types of environments with the instructor. Obviously, the student discussion forums, group event. One of the ways, if we believe that one of the ways students learn is to discuss amongst themselves, if we can get them to start in the discussion points doing a forum piece where they start talking about it each other. I do a lot where I put them into groups. Okay? That group is controlled, it's locked. None of the other groups can see it, so it's their communication as a group. But what's nice about it is they now have to discuss with each other. So if I raise an issue, I can see if the group is getting it. You know? There's some learning theory out there, that groups work better together. But at least when I get the results out of that group, I can see where they're going. Did they get it? I can add in my pieces to it. So I can get them working beyond the point of individual and into sort of group pieces. As I've already talked about, legal education is the large lecture and Socratic method the most effective way to teach higher level learning. I don't think so. Okay? If it's not, we need to think about the integration of technology, demonstrate and teach challenges facing lawyers. Can we restructure the way we teach? Okay, I don't think there's much hope given the ABA standards that I can do much with the first year structure. But what can we do with the second and third year structures? So, I need to use brainstorming. I teach a class in interviewing and negotiating counseling. When I did a negotiation piece, I teach them how to brainstorm. And then I make them do a negotiation. And what I hope they'll do in that negotiation is brainstorm. Guess what they never did? Brainstorm. And I think it's one of the hardest skills to sort of teach. But since I got a captive audience here and I got 5 minutes with each of you, I'd like to see you break into some groups of about 6, brainstorm real quickly, and tell me what we could do with the second and third year curriculum. That might allow us to make use of 1/3 of the classroom, not traditional. What we might do structurally to make it work. I got a nice group of 6 right here. Come on, talk a little. Take about 5 minutes. Share some ideas. Now, for brainstorming to work good, one of you has to take notes.
Oh, take notes. I like making millennials spoken first. I like to see more on that. Actually, I was thinking about this morning when I actually had real miles. Yeah, some of our students get actually practical working with
We have an optional 1 hour fact responsible for, and they come out and you see some of the sections or something. So if you just want to learn the laws, make sure they sign ordinance, also you can take sign up for the class. But if you want, you can sign up an option, but making it a SAT, you can get taught by adjunct faculty.
I don't think we heard
Your job is to help real world problems, stress, building, they're supposed to give you 2 opportunities for written evaluation. Anyway, I try to. And actually, that's actually they did it now. Occasionally. The way I try to say it, I try to sell somebody. I've used CALI.
That's good, because that's what I'm doing in the real life.
Yeah, what I've done in the past is taken some exam questions, 3 exam questions from 3 years in the past, and I've posted on a wiki where they can actually go together and modify the answers. You can actually see who's modifying what. You can actually see which person has actually put in the actual answer, and then they come up with a final answer, and then we can comment on the final answer. No, at the end. I give them a week to come up with an answer on 3 questions. They can add 5.
Those kind of testing on ongoing work.
Correct.
Exactly.
And most of them are previous exam questions.
The recording of the discussion actually
Just got to spend some time explaining the
I'm not quite in that phase yet.
But once they get
Somebody will actually propose a good question via email, and I will answer it and let everyone know I should just have this should be its own little.
That morning while they were on the treadmill or wherever they're listening, and then when they get to class, we can get functioning, and that is very
That makes the class. I like that's the classroom. Which should look at the synchronous where there's true distance. We're talking about here, introducing an electronic process already. Really want to take advantage of it. When is it an advantage to do that? That stuff that you have. Giving students the having them respond to the class.
Without reaching any recording device.
I like the
Okay, pull you all back if you don't have a lot of time. So, any great ideas? You got the answer for me? I don't know if there's any one answer. I know that I can take and do different things. For example, I teach an interviewing and negotiation counseling class I mentioned to you. I teach it on 4 Saturdays. Kind of interesting. I almost always fill the class. Kind of interesting. What I find is students like the idea that it's on 4 Saturdays. It's done. I teach it the first, second, fourth, and sixth Saturday of the month, semester, from 9 to 4 p.m. So it's over halfway through the course. Makes it really well. It lends itself very well to this idea of being 3 segments, because I get to segment it as interviewing, negotiation, and counseling. We get the focus. My interviewing segment, what I'm doing now and working on for the next time I teach this class is I'm actually going to integrate, any of you familiar with Medianotes? It's actually a product out there called Medianotes. What's really nice is the guy who developed this product, I think is a law professor, and so he gave it to CALI. So you actually can download it. What it's designed to do is fairly simple. What I do after my interviewing section is my students have to do, okay? Basically, I give them a packet of information. They have to find a client. The client is given the information, and then they have to interview the client. Okay? And that, historically, what I had to do was they videotape it. Then what they would do is they would watch the videotape based upon what they should have learned from interviewing. They all think they can interview, right? This is the easiest thing in the world. We go through this whole Saturday. We do, teach them the steps using Binder and Price of how to do an interview. We do simulations, role plays through the day. They all think they've got it, okay? And I've laid out the structure of an interview for them. They have the paperwork. So you would think that we come back, I would have a beautiful interview that would just match up to the layout I taught them, right? Doesn't happen. But what I do make them do is they have to rewatch their video because they have to tape it. Then they had to write based upon this, what they learned in Binder and Price and show me how they did it or whether problems were. Usually the report at that point's pretty good, right? They figured out what they did wrong, what they didn't get, and then they come in and I talk to them. And what I do is, so I have to watch the film. I have to look at their comments and then pick out the pieces where I think they still have some problems or what that is. With Medianotes, what I'm allowed to do is basically take their file, they download it into Medianotes, and they can add their comments as they go through it. So it allows them to make their comments. That's the way I use it, in a sense. So I can then watch the tape and see their comments simultaneously. And then I can put my comments in, and then they can get it back and see it. So from a sense, I can take some of the face-to-face that I had to do with them and hopefully move it into a non-face-to-face that we could do in a sort of process piece of the process. Nice thing about Medianotes, for you as a faculty member, it's free. For our students, I think it's like $15 they have to pay to be able to download it. But then they can do this with anything they use. So I use it for this. I'm trying to get my trial practice people excited about it. But any sort of skills piece that you want to integrate, nice way to integrate that and get feedback to them. Pull it up, give them feedback back, and go through it. So a skills sort of structural piece that allows it to develop in. Negotiation section. I'm pretty basic. I have them read Getting to Yes. Anybody read Getting to Yes? Getting to Yes is a great book to read because you can buy actually a video of Getting to Yes. Uri and Fisher and some other guy, Canton, I think is it. They did actually a DVD put together. They have a mini one and a long one. The mini one's like about 6 hours and the long one's like 12 hours. I use the short version. But I can actually then have them have to read Getting to Yes, do some things on that Saturday where they watch some of this. And we role play, we simulate, we go through, we teach them how to brainstorm. It's a great session on brainstorming, and we do a couple of neat things, I use some of the handouts from the dispute center up at University of Chicago. You get a disc from them, they give it to you for free, and you don't have to, if you use them, you pay like $3 for every student in your class for the thing. So that's a great one, We do some exciting things, like how do you sell pantyhose? Brainstorm on ideas of how to get men to buy pantyhose. They like that. It's fun to them. Makes it work. Then after that class is over, I have a negotiation problem that I give to the two students, A and B. They again negotiate, videotape it, and have to critique and evaluate themselves. Again, I can move that into Medianotes, allow them to do those sort of pieces, put it together. So I'm trying to think of ways that I might be able to. And the other piece I'm looking at is integrating an online negotiation training. There happens to be a product by a company called Stitfeld and Handy, have an online negotiation course. I'm trying to get them to lower their price. I'm still waiting to see if they'll do it for me. But they have a full course. And if you're interested, they actually have one section of it called the print shop that you can actually watch online for free. But what they're doing is doing an animation negotiation pieces that go through the steps. Sort of, if you remember the old video disc, the old big video disc for trial practice where you used to object and that. Same idea. Do text and negotiation, sort of feedback, bits and pieces. So again, what I'm hoping is I can start having them do some online things that might allow me to reduce the actual face-to-face classroom time that I would be involved in those pieces. And finally, how do I do assessment? Where I think I'm moving with assessment is to the next phase of Turning Point. We'll be looking at Turning Point. Turning Point has the clickers, which you can buy. They also have what you can download onto your computer, a virtual clicker pad in essence. The reason I'm excited about that particular feature, if they move it along the way they're talking about it, is it's IP-based. So theoretically, I could hold a mega meeting, for example, with my students. They could do a virtual response on the clicker, and I could instantaneously see the result at my IP address. It would just be clicking. And I love it because they're talking about doing a web-hosted solution. So they would run the server at their site, which meets mine, but allow me to do response in an environment that would not have to be face-to-face. So I could do an online piece structured together. We're also looking at MediaSite. Anybody use MediaSite? MediaSite, or anybody using any type of capturing to capture a classroom lecture?
Integrity.
Espresso, any of those products?
Integrity.
Integrity. Integrity is a great product. Anybody using their scene? Are they here?
I don't think so.
Integrity is a software-based product, which I like about it because you can load it onto your own laptop. Literally, you could put together a presentation. So if you wanted to do a lecture after you'll be out of town, with Integrity, I could capture my PowerPoint, my talk, put it up on their web host. If you buy it this way, on their hosted solution, and be up there. It'd be password protected. Your students could go in and do it. We've been trying to talk our faculty into thinking about what is it that you do in your subject that doesn't change. We'll talk a lot with my property professors. I have a property professor who's really well known in the community. When he came to us, he'd just done 25 years at the University of South Carolina. He is the best known professor in South Carolina. I mean, this is the honest truth. I'd be walking down the street with our director of admissions who had worked for 13 years at the University of South Carolina that first summer when we were opening law school. And every time he'd run into a lawyer, first of all, this guy remembered every lawyer he'd ever accepted into the University of South Carolina by name, our director of admissions. And they would stop and they go, I can't believe that Steve Spitz is coming to your law school. It was that exciting. Well, Steve actually uses clickers. This guy's 58 years old, and he uses clickers in his classroom. We've been actually, my biggest problem, I have to stand there, one of my people, making sure it works for me. He has a little problem with technology for that level. But he's really excited about these things. Well, I said to Steve, you've been 20 years. How many times have you given a lecture on future interests? Has it ever changed? I said, that's the perfect area to say, can we use some type of video capture, do it professionally, make it very good, and you can say, next year when you're ready to do future interests, students, we have this up on the website, click on it, and you can listen to it at your leisure. Now I've just freed up an hour of my classroom time. Right? I really believe if we want to free up 5 weeks, what we're trying to do is to offload it to our students, to give us more time in the classroom to do higher level information. If I don't have to give that
Wait a minute, if you're going to require them to listen to that hour lecture.
Well, here's my point. Do you believe, I believe that students should be spending minimally 2 hours on every one of my classes. Do I think they're doing that today? No, I don't think so. I don't think most of my students are putting in the amount of time. I'll give you an instance, and this is kind of ironic. I did a semester at Case Western in Cleveland when I was a Canadian law student. Rule of thumb for Canadian students who went to Case Western for a semester, their grades went up a full letter. Case Western students who came to Canada, their grades went down a full letter. Most of the Canadian students said, and this was 20 years ago, gee, it is such a breeze being at Case Western. I don't have hardly anything I have to read compared to what I was in Canada. And the poor case Western students who came to Canada said, this is horrendous. They asked us to read so much more.